You're reading a comment section. Nothing unusual. Someone agrees with the post. Someone adds a nuance. Someone shares a personal story that feels relevant. And you almost respond. Almost. But something stops you. Not because the comments are hostile. Not because they're wrong. Because something about the texture feels off. Too polished. Too helpful. Too perfectly on topic. The kind of helpfulness that doesn't have fingerprints on it. You scroll past. You don't respond. And you don't think about why. Not consciously. But somewhere underneath the moment, a muscle twitches. A reflex you didn't used to have. The reflex of doubting whether what you just read was written by someone who exists. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's not a tech panic. It's something quieter and more ordinary than that. It's the feeling that the room changed while you were in it.
Here's the thing nobody announced. No one sent a memo. No headlines declared the moment. But sometime in the last 2 years, the balance shifted. More than half of all traffic on the internet is now generated by bots. Not half the spam, not half the junk, half of all traffic. The browsing, the clicking, the commenting, the engaging, more than 53% of it is not coming from people. It's coming from systems designed to look like people. And that number is accelerating. AI-driven traffic nearly tripled in a single year. A new category, agentic traffic, bots that don't just read the web, but act on it, post on it, transact on it, grew by nearly 8,000%. You're probably thinking, okay, but I can tell. I know the difference between a bot and a person. Except you don't. Not anymore. Not reliably. The bots that existed 5 years ago were clumsy. Broken grammar, generic phrases, obvious patterns. The ones operating now write better than most humans. They hold context across conversations. They adapt tone. They ask follow-up questions. And here's where it gets stranger. The platforms know. Reddit is building verification systems to check whether accounts are operated by humans. Digg, one of the internet's original social platforms, openly blamed an AI bot surge for damaging trust in its own engagement systems. The infrastructure is reacting because the infrastructure can feel it breaking. Therefore, the feeling you have that something is off, that the vibe died, that comment sections feel empty even when they're full, isn't anxiety. It's accurate perception. Your nervous system is detecting a change that your conscious mind hasn't named yet. But the real problem isn't the bots. The real problem is what the bots are doing to you. Not to your data, not to your attention, to something more fundamental than that. To your willingness to assume that the next thing you read was written by a person who meant it. There's a term for what's disappearing. Call it the presumption of humanness. It's the unspoken agreement that held the internet together from the beginning. The default assumption that the entity on the other side of any interaction is a person until proven otherwise. You never signed that agreement. Nobody did. It was just there. The same way you assume a letter in your mailbox was written by a human hand, or a voice on the phone belongs to a person breathing somewhere. The presumption of humanness wasn't a feature. It wasn't a setting. It was the atmosphere. And you only notice an atmosphere when it starts to thin. Turns out, this isn't the first time an atmosphere collapsed online. In 2022, a philosopher and media theorist sat in a room and wrote something that would start as internet folklore and end as a genuine epistemological crisis. He called it the dead internet theory. The original version was conspiratorial, the claim that most of the internet's content was already generated by bots, and that human participation was a shrinking minority. When it first circulated, people treated it as paranoia, the kind of idea you encounter on a forum at 3 a.m. and forget by morning. But here's the part nobody expected. The data started confirming it. Not the conspiracy, the feeling underneath the conspiracy. Imperva's annual report, Human Security's traffic analysis, Reddit's own engineering response. Platform after platform began acknowledging, quietly, that the ratio was shifting.
that the balance between human-generated and machine-generated presence online was tilting in a direction nobody had prepared for. And this is where the theory becomes philosophy. Because the dead internet theory isn't really about bots, it's about trust. Specifically, it's about what happens to a social space when you can no longer presume that the other participants are real. Every online community, every forum, every comment section, every social platform was built on an invisible assumption that engagement meant someone chose to engage, that a reply meant someone cared enough to reply, that a like meant a human finger touched a screen because something landed. Therefore, when that assumption erodes, not through a dramatic event, but through a slow statistical shift, the entire emotional architecture of being online changes. Not because the internet looks different, because it feels different. The comments are still there, the replies are still there, the engagement is still there, but the weight behind them is gone. It's like walking into your favorite bar and realizing, slowly, that you're not sure anymore if the people at the other tables are customers or furniture arranged to look like customers. The drinks still taste the same, the music still plays, but something about being there has changed. And it changed before you noticed.
And maybe that's the part worth sitting with. Not the bots, not the traffic numbers, not the verification systems or the platform responses. The part worth sitting with is what the presumption of humanness actually gave you, what it felt like before it started thinning. It gave you the right to be careless online, to type quickly, to misspell something and know the person on the other side would understand because they misspell things too. To leave a comment and not wonder whether the reply came from something that needed to reply because it was designed to. It gave you the ability to stumble into a stranger's thought at 2 a.m. and feel less alone. Not because the thought was brilliant, but because someone, somewhere, couldn't sleep either. That carelessness was never a flaw. It was intimacy. The low-resolution, imperfect, typo-filled intimacy of people being people on the internet without having to prove they were. And maybe the question isn't whether the internet is dying. Maybe the question is what kind of place it becomes when you have to prove you're human before anyone believes you're there. You're still staring at the screen. The comment section hasn't changed. The words are still there. Supportive, articulate, responsive. But you don't respond. Not because you have nothing to say, because you're not sure anymore whether saying it matters to anyone who breathes. And that doubt, that tiny, almost invisible hesitation before pressing send, that's the real cost. Not the bots, not the traffic. The moment you stopped trusting, by default, that someone was on the other side. The room is still full. You just stopped assuming anyone else was in it.